Hi, Malita, and this is my channel, The Midnight Librarian. Today I will be talking about my November wrap-up. For the month of November, I was coming out of a reading slump. October, I didn't do too well. I still got some reading done, but in November, I definitely got better. I still considered myself in the reading slump at the beginning of November, and by the end of it, I was really feeling like I hit my stride of reading again. Particularly audiobooks. I felt like in October, I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to read, and in November, I kind of figured it out again, so it was nice. November, in terms of personal life, we got our kitchen back. I don't know if I've mentioned that yet. So our kitchen is done. My brother's stuff is out of my office, which is fantastic. So that's been really nice. I now have, like, I can go nearly anywhere in my office for like a perspective. It is still quite messy, mostly because the books that I had in another room had to come in here for our contractor to be able to work, and I'm still in the midst of sorting through them to see if I really want some books, and then trying to figure out where the books I'm still keeping but haven't read yet will go. So after going through that, I think I'm going to put myself on a book buying ban, which, yeah, we'll see how well that goes. Yeah, otherwise, November, it was Native American Heritage Month, and so I participated in the Skoden Readathon, hosted by Kim from Native Book Lady Warrior. This was a Native American Indigenous authored theme readathon to encourage folks to read Indigenous authored books. There's a bingo board. I didn't really keep track of the bingo board, mostly because I figured so long as I was reading by a book authored by an Indigenous author, then I was doing good. So I try to do that anyway throughout the year, and I encourage you all to do so too. Don't stick with November. Broaden your and diversify your books all year round. But it was definitely fun to just kind of push myself to read more Indigenous authored books for the month of November. The same with nonfiction books. So I am a big fan of nonfiction books. I grew up thinking that nonfiction was meant as not fun, and thought they were dry and boring, and then by the time I got into college, I found otherwise. So November was also Nonfiction November, which is a readathon hosted by Olive over at A Book Olive, which encourages folks to read nonfiction books, or at least more than you would normally. I don't think I read any more than I guess I did. I think I read some different ones than what I normally do, so it'll be interesting to let you know. So let's go ahead and go into the books that I did read for November. I know I did do a November TBR. I normally put it on Google Sheets. I have a spreadsheet for that, and I guess I didn't for November at all. Even though I made a video and put it up here on YouTube, I guess I just, like, typically TBRs are just guidelines. So long as I'm reading, I really don't care, and I will typically try to switch books out for prompts and just keep that in mind. And I just didn't for November because I was still thinking I was in a reading slump. I figured so long as I was reading, I didn't care. So I don't even remember what I put on my TBR. All I know is that I probably didn't follow it, but if you want to check it out, feel free. I don't know how many books I actually read from that. So with that, for the month of November, I ended up reading 9 books, which is great. It's the same amount I read in September. And then for pages, it was 2,494. For the genres, I read 1 contemporary, 2 graphic novels, 2 horror, 1 mystery, and 3 nonfictions. For format, I have 6 audiobooks and 3 physical. For audience, I have 7 adult and 1 YA. And for the rating breakdown, I have 2 not rated, which I'm realizing that is what I would prefer to do for memoirs, or biographies, autobiographies, just 'cause, yeah. It just feels better to me. Otherwise, I have 0 1 stars, 0 2 stars, 0 3 stars, 4 3.5 stars, 2 4 stars, 1 4.5 star, and 0 5 stars, which gives November the average rating of 3.79. So kind of very middle of the road. The first book that I read for November was actually an advanced listener's copy through Libro FM. And that was River Woman and River Demon by Jennifer Given, and was narrated by Kyla Garcia. I really enjoy Kyla Garcia's narration. She ends up narrating quite a few books that are Indigenous authored, written by Indigenous authors. And this one, River Woman or River Demon, is also written by an Indigenous author, which I didn't know until after I listened to it. So that was pretty cool. River Woman, River Demon was a mystery / horror. It was really kind of, let me give you the synopsis first. When Eva's husband is arrested for the murder of a friend, she must confront her murky past and embrace her magic to find out what really happened that night on the river. Eva Santos Moon is a burgeoning Chicana artist who practices the ancient spiritual ways of brujeria and curanderism. I'm sorry, I'm gonna mispronounce this. Curanderism. But she's at one of her lowest points, suffering from disorienting blackouts, creative stagnation, and feeling a disconnect from her magical roots. When her husband, a beloved university professor and the glue that holds her family together, is taken into custody for the shocking murder of their friend, Eva doesn't know whom to trust, least of all herself. She soon falls under the suspicion as potential suspect, and her past rises to the surface, dredging up the truth about an earlier similar death from her childhood. So that's all I'm going to really let you know of. So reading the synopsis helps me remember too, because I forget that I read this in November. It feels like so much yeah. It feels like longer than that. So River Woman, River Demon, I wasn't sure how I was going to like this. What kept me interested was the brujeria aspect of it. And honestly, like, I loved the husband in this book. I had the hardest time with this main character. Eva Santos Moon was, I don't like unreliable narrations, from the view of our main character. It's never something I've enjoyed. I think reviewed a couple of books with that same element, one of which was nominated for Goodreads Choice Awards, which, okay, whatever. And this one had that aspect of it. It wasn't so much that she was an unreliable narrator. It was more that she didn't trust herself. She wasn't, Eva didn't have the confidence in herself. I would definitely say trigger warnings for a couple of things. Cheating, racism, murder, graphic depictions of blood, mention of death, drowning, and stalking. Yeah. Basically, all the supporting characters for Eva kept me going forward, because there were multiple moments where we were just in Eva's head a lot, where I'm just like, what? Like, I almost DNF'd this book multiple times. I'm glad I pushed through, but it was difficult. So I think I ended up in Goodreads gave this like 4 stars, but it was more of a mid 3, and I just rounded up. It was more of a 3.5 star in all honesty. The ending and, like I said, the supporting characters definitely saved it. Eva, I had a hard time with. So, And I'm not sure which prompts that worked for the Skoden Readathon, but because it's an Indigenous author, I'm counting it. So the next book I read was a memoir, and that was Red Paint by Sasha Texan Blue LaPointe, the ancestral autobiography of a Coastal Salish punk. I would definitely say, like, look up trigger warnings for this, or like take care of yourself before getting into this, because there are some pretty heavy topics in here. An Indigenous artist blends the aesthetics of punk rock with the traditional spiritual practices of the women in her lineage and its bold contemporary journey to reclaim her heritage. Sasha Texan Blue LaPointe has always longed for a sense of home. When she was a child, her family moved around frequently, often staying in barely habitable church attics and trailers, dangerous places for young Sasha, with little more to guide her than a passion for thriving punk scene of the Pacific Northwest and a desire to live up to the responsibility of being the namesake of her beloved great-grandmother, a linguist who helped preserve her Indigenous language, Lushootseed. Sasha throws herself headlong into the world, determined to use the power of her voice to build a better future for herself and her people. Yeah, there was definitely moments in here that made me tear up. A lot of moments in here that I related to, especially in terms of who she ended up trusting and becoming her partner. Just because there was some instances, particularly with those partners, that didn't necessarily give her their full support. There were some things said that definitely like made my heart drop because I related to it. There's also a theme of intergenerational trauma and like stuff that Sasha had to work through, that like we find out that her mother also had to work through and her grandmother had to work through. So yeah, it's an unfortunate, it's really, yeah, it was really powerful and really just, I'm finding that there are multiple aspects of this book that I'm constantly thinking about, so particularly throughout the month. So yeah, this also worked for the Skoden Readathon. Again, I don't remember what the prompts were. The next book was also another Advanced Listeners copy from Libro FM, and that was My First Popsicle by Zalcia Marnet. And this was illustrated, but not illustrated, narrated by a bunch of people, because it's essentially an anthology about food. Basically, Zosia had has an interesting relationship with food herself in terms of having gone through an eating disorder growing up. But there was this book got brought about by her witnessing a friend's toddler or infant trying a popsicle for the first time and seeing all these emotions and expressions that this child who's eating a first popsicle for the first time is going through. Just like, do I like that? Is that good? Yes, that's good. Like, what is going on? And she really just got inspired of just like our connection with food and memory, and basically asked a bunch of people if they would submit essays to help bring this book to life, really. And so there's like books from various different people, particularly celebrities, so like Katie Holmes, Callie Cacao, I don't know if that's her last name anymore, but a bunch of people, and basically it's essays about food and their memories associated with that particular food item. I like the concept of this, actually, and I'm on a kind of using it in the library that I work in to we typically do like whiteboard questions or polls, just as something fun to kind of interact with some of our patrons with, and particularly for winter, we didn't want to go to the holiday route at all. I wanted to do more with food, and this helped in terms of like I would love to know someone's like favorite food, or like a food that strongly depicts a memory for them. But there's for a whiteboard and for like little bitty paper cutouts for them to tape up, it's really hard to like give enough room for that. So Mine was basically just, what's your favorite comfort food, particularly as we enter finals week. I think this would be a nice little distraction for them, and maybe something to look forward to as they head into winter break. But this book in itself, like I said, I really love the concept, and I would love to find out, like, honestly would love to post this question out to all the library staff, faculty that I work with, or even like campus wide. I know that our university just did a staff led cookbook, so I think it would be real fun to do something similar to this book. I think the problem that I had with this book in particular is that it wasn't that memorable. As bad as that is to say, like, there was a couple stories that definitely stuck out. For instance, spaghetti and meatballs. That's the only one I really remember. But it wasn't, I mean, it was just okay. So, but I loved the premise of it. The next book that I read was another Indigenous authored book, and that was Zombie Bake Off by Stephen Graham Jones. I have an odd relationship with Stephen Graham Jones. There's some books of his that I absolutely love, this one being one of them, as well as like what's the other one, The Only Good Indians. But then there's other one, and as well as Night of the Mannequins. But then there's others that I'm just like, I don't quite understand. Like, for some reason, my brain doesn't grasp it. No matter like how many times I reread a paragraph, it doesn't feel like I'm smart enough to understand this book. And that is My Heart is a Chainsaw and Mapping the Interior. So Stephen Graham Jones is keeping me on my toes in terms of figuring out if I really enjoy his writing. But Zombie Bake Off is pretty fun, actually, in that essentially there is a bake-off show that is going on in a small town, and a wrestling team is scheduled to go on after them in the same area. Like, there's these two wrestling opponents that show up. One's showing up alone, his name is Zombie, and the opponent is like surrounded by like bikers and like punks and whatever, and they show up early to make sure that everything is set, but they show up before the bake-off actually even starts, but they want to enjoy it. Unfortunately, somehow folks end up getting infected by a zombie virus, and they're all locked in this warehouse together. So it was a really interesting and chaotic book. It's relatively short, and so that description I feel is like the only real description I can share with you without spoiling anything. But it was real interesting. It didn't necessarily have to do with Indigenous folks, but we don't really know because it didn't say who was what. But it was real interesting. I enjoyed it. It was just a fun read to listen to. I do hope to get a physical copy of this book. The same, I think, I've been going back and forth with River Woman and River Demon with that too. But the next book that I read, I think I ended up reading as I was trying to like sort through in here. I actually kind of forgot I had this because it was, my children's books are in a different location. Like, they're still in this room, they're just on a different shelf. But that is What's My Superpower by Aviak Johnston and illustrated by Tim Mack. And this is also an Indigenous authored book. Aviak Johnston is Inuit. And this is basically just a cute children's book about this little girl named Nelvana trying to figure out what her superpower is, because all her friends seem to have superpowers and she can't figure out what hers is. So it was just really cute, and the illustrations were just fun, and it was a really kind of just wholesome book. Yeah, it was, I don't know, it was one of those, it was a small one. I didn't know what to pick up next, so I ended up just picking this one up, and I'm glad I did. So yeah, it was cute. In that same vein of when I was organizing and got distracted, I ended up picking up Bingo Love Jackpot Edition by T. Franklin, Jen St. Onge, and Joey San. And this is basically the story of this woman who is in her, like, who is now experiencing her later part of her life and reflecting on this forbidden romance she had with her best friend. Here, let me just take a trip through time with Hazel Johnson and Mari McKay as they fall in love at church bingo in 1963, break up because of pressure from their families, and reunite nearly 50 years later. Yeah, it was really cute. I don't know how else to explain it. I'm sure other folks have, this has been making its way through BookTube, and like, that's how I heard of it. That's where I got it, and it was really cute. There were elements in here that did make me cry, because content warning for dementia, because yeah, there was a lot of heartfelt moments. It was really enjoyable. So the next book that I read was The Cartographers by Pang Shepard. I actually ended up listening to this through my my county library. They had it through Libby, and I didn't mind it. This was definitely like a love letter to maps. We are following Nell Young, whose whole life and greatest passion is cartography. Her father, Dr. Daniel Young, is a legend in the field and Nell's personal hero, but she hasn't seen or spoken to him ever since he cruelly fired her and destroyed her reputation after an argument over an old cheap gas station highway map. When Dr. Young is found dead in his office at the New York Public Library with the very same seemingly worthless map hidden in his desk, Nell can't resist investigating. To her surprise, she soon discovers that the map is incredibly valuable and exceedingly rare. So that's all I'm going to let you know of that. But yeah, I enjoyed Nell, but I felt like, and I enjoyed this story to a point. I enjoyed it like because of its basically its devotion to maps. It was really fun. However, I felt like there were moments in here that were really dramatic, and I also felt like it didn't really give I wasn't expecting fantasy elements to it, and there was definitely fantasy elements to it, and I felt like it wasn't quite, it was either like not enough of it to be magical realism. It wasn't subtle enough to be magical realism, but it wasn't over. It wasn't. It felt just over dramatic, but underwhelming to be fantasy. I don't know. It was this weird middle ground that I wasn't quite wanting out of this. I don't know. Yeah, it was fine. Pang Shepard, I've had this one for a while. I think this one came out this year or in 2021. But I've also wanted to read the Book of M, which I believe is their first book. So hopefully I can get to that at some point and figure out if I just like Pang Shepard's work. But this one, I don't know, it kind of fell flat for me. I did enjoy, like I said, I did enjoy the map aspect of it. But everything else was just kind of eh. The next book I read was also for the Skoden Readathon. However, it was also a required reading that I had to do for my critical plant studies class, and that is The Seed Keeper by Diane Wilson. This one was actually given to me by Milkweed Books, so thank you so much to them. I really enjoyed this book, actually. So this one was another one that I ended up listening to. I ended up buying the audiobook from Libro FM just because with required reading and with like physically reading in general, I am not that fast at it because I only read like just before I go to bed, and because I had to finish this for a class, it made sense to go the audiobook route. I think it was also Kyla Garcia that narrated this book. So this one, we are following Rosalie Ironwing, who returns home from which she has taken was taken as a child, orphan, widow, and mother. Journalist and gardener Rosalie has spent the previous 2 decades watching as her white husband's family's farm is threatened first by drought and then by a predatory chemical company. Now grieving, she finally begins to confront the past and embrace the future, and in the process learns what it means to be descended from women with souls of iron, women who have protected their families, their traditions, and a precious cachet of seeds through generations of hardship and loss. So I enjoyed this because I think it offers a lot of themes that are still very much relevant today. Rosalie Ironwing was taken from her family right before ICWA was put into place, and now with ICWA going to the Supreme Court, this has been a constant issue, because there are states, and for particularly people in Texas and other states, that feel like ICWA is causing more harm than good, which it's not. But like most things put into law, it needs to be updated, because much like ICWA and social work, a lot of the laws were written in the 1970s and need to be adopted to today's standards. So Rosalie was feeling the effect of that, and the whole book she was wanting to do things her way, how she learned from her dad, who was also Native, and teach her son those things. However, because she was so unsure of herself, because she didn't have that teaching throughout her whole life, just basically her childhood, and even though she felt like it was the right way to go, her self-confidence in that just didn't allow her to be able to teach her son those things, which I see in my own community every day, of just, and even feel within myself, of just like this unsureness, of this self-doubt of if I'm doing it the right way. This made me, we ended up reading right after Seed, The Untold Story, which is a documentary about seed banks and folks hoping to save the rest of the seeds that we have, because we lost like 97% of our seed diversity and our food diversity within the last like 10 years. So both this book combined with that documentary has really made me look into like seed saving myself and not being so reliant on buying seeds every year. I do have a garden that I try to help feed my family with, and it was hilarious because after watching the documentary and then getting into this, and as I was reading this, I wanted to find other books regarding saving seeds and what heirloom seeds are versus GMO seeds. And when we get to the end of this book, Rosalie is told, quit putting your nose in books. The plants will tell you what they need. And which is, yeah, I get it, but like it's still that unsureness, that self-confidence that still needs boosting, that I still grab onto, like, someone else teach me please, because I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, I have ordered some things, and in terms of like little seed envelopes, as well as a container to hold my envelopes. I'm also starting like my own little binder so that I can make logs of like what I do to my seed or my plant beds, and see what works and what doesn't. Yeah, I think it'll be fun. It's gonna be my own little project going on. So yeah, I ultimately those two books, this book and that documentary really like had me thinking the whole time, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, it was really fun. The last book that I read for the month of November was Will by Will Smith. This is Will Smith's autobiography, and I ended up listening to this through my library, which was interesting because as I started reading it, Will Smith got into the news again, in terms of folks like saying they weren't ready to see him in a movie yet, his movie that's coming out, Emancipation. because they're still reeling over the slap, which is ridiculous. I've always been a Will Smith fan, and I very much enjoy his movies. There's some movies that I like purposely don't watch though, because I don't feel like crying. So Pursuit of Happiness, 7 Pounds, I Am Legend. Yeah, but like I've always enjoyed Will Smith, and it was fun learning more about him in his book, and I really suggest, if you are still interested in his autobiography, to go the audiobook route, because he does narrate it himself, as well as has snippets of music that he has helped with, that he has produced, as well as that has inspired him throughout the years. It was really cool to get those little snippets. It was really it was awesome just to hear more about him. It's always one of those things, I'm always hesitant with celebrity biographies, just because I don't know, I don't know if it's like this own stigma that I have that I need to work on, that they're just like, I don't know. But I did really enjoy Will Smith's autobiography. I think I may stick with, I like the idea of getting a physical copy, but like I really did enjoy the audiobook because of the extra snippets that he put in. I enjoyed his growth too, particularly. There were definitely elements throughout his life that he was kind of an ass, but he was aware of that and he acknowledged that. And it was just kind of one of those things of just like, yeah, he has faults and that makes it better. So yeah, those were the books that I read in November. If you've read any of these, please let me know your thoughts down in the comments down below. Otherwise, if you made it this far, remember, give it a like, subscribe if you have yet to do so already. And in terms of an emoji, is there a seed? Let's do another plant. I know I keep doing plants, but like I like plants, so let's do a plant. Otherwise, I hope that you are in the mental mindset to enjoy your reading, and I will see you in another video very soon. Chew.